everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Marnie, and I am the Senior Vice President of Programs for Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration. We are an organization that works internationally to help communities design and build inclusive playgrounds. We have 75 open worldwide, and we have 50 more in development. And we go beyond that to help organizations, schools, communities advocate for and implement social inclusion programming so that those playgrounds really become classrooms where children with and without disabilities learn how to engage beyond their fears, their misconceptions, their bias towards each other, and find common ground through the magic of play. So it's a new year, yay. I don't know if anyone did a little dance at the end of 2020, but I was dancing in circles around the room with joy. And hopefully this new year brings renewed hope and some inspiration. But we also know it brings continued challenges in living, in teaching, in learning through a pandemic. So we're relaunching our Lunch and Learn series to help support educators, parents, community members in just gaining more tips and tools on how to support ourselves and support the development of our kids, because they are still zooming in from home in many parts of the country. So quick housekeeping note, thank you guys for joining us today. And we are going to have the chat open throughout this entire hour. So please post your questions there. And at the end of it, oh, and I apologize, to do that, click on participants at the bottom center of your screen. At the bottom of the window on the right side of your screen, click the button labeled raise hands. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have time where you can raise your hand and we'll just unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions directly. So we have the honor of introducing Erica Curtis. She's amazing and took the time to be with us today. We're thrilled to have her here. She is a marriage and family therapist and a certified art therapist. She also works with UCLArts Healing and specializes in curriculum development and instruction. She's an international speaker and consults with a wide variety of universities and boards, as well as an award-winning author. And I have read her book and Ping Ho's book. They co-wrote it. And I cannot tell you how much I love it. So I'm just going to hold it up right now. Hopefully, there we go. It's The Innovative Parent. And it's raising connected, happy, successful kids through art. And it is not only a joy to read and funny, but it's got a wide variety of tips and tools for parents that are really usable, and educators, anyone who works with kids. So she's going to walk us through today and really looking at how to use art to help our kids navigate what has been an incredibly stressful year on so many levels. So thank you, Erica, for being here. And I'm going to hand it off to you so we can get started.
Hi, Marnie. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to just take a moment to share my screen and we will be off and running. As I move through my slides, you'll find that my computer can get a little sleepy. So if I'm not actively moving it, it'll take a little moment to wake up. So as Marnie mentioned, we're going to talk today about helping children manage stress through creativity during challenging times. And any of the activities that we're doing today, I hope that you'll see the applicability to various settings, whether you're an educator or a parent or a counselor or a mentor or whatever fashion that you interact with children, that you'll see the usefulness of these strategies. And you may even, as we're moving through this material, notice the usefulness for yourselves as well. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to go ahead and grab some sort of writing or drawing materials. If you didn't grab anything, you can just open up your desk drawer and get a pencil or a ballpoint pen. It doesn't need to be colored pencils or markers. And if you can grab some paper as well, I just grabbed some computer paper out of my printer. But if you don't have that, you can use lined paper or even Post-it notes. I recently did a wellness workshop actually for a bunch of attorneys, and I let them know if art materials is too intimidating, use office supplies if that feels more accessible to you. So a ballpoint pen and a Post-it note works just fine for what we're doing today. Okay, we're going to start by talking a little bit about why creativity. But to do that, the best way to show you is to let you experience for yourselves. So what I'm going to invite you to start with is to think of something mildly stressful. This isn't therapy, so don't pick a 10 out of 10, right? Pick maybe like a 4 out of 10, something that's just kind of stressing you out a little bit, or maybe was stressing you out, but is moving towards resolution, okay? And really allow yourself to, as you think about that stressful situation, to feel a little bit in your body, if you can, if that's comfortable, to notice that stressful feeling or what that's like to experience stress. And I'm going to do this along with you. So while we're noticing that stress, I'm going to give you 2 options. You can either start to scribble, or you can scrunch your paper, just like you see on the screen, okay? So either scribbling, starting to scribble out that stress. Now, a lot of times what grown-ups will do is they'll kind of, and this is fine, there's no right or wrong, this isn't art class, this is a different use of art, but a lot of times adults will do kind of like a flowy, sort of subtle scribble. And then when I say, now really notice your stress, really feel your stress inside, and they go, oh, and then they really start going to town. But however you would like to do it, go ahead and start scribbling out your stress, or I'm going to do the scrunch up your stress into a ball, okay, by scrunching that paper just like this. And again, there's no right or wrong. This isn't refrigerator art. We're not going to be hanging this up. Okay. Now, if you've done the scrunchy ball part, you can go ahead and start to open it up. Or if you've done the scribble, whenever you feel like you're at a good stopping point with your scribble, you can go ahead and just take a look at it, all right? So whether you've scribbled or scrunched, you will notice that you've created several lines and shapes on your piece of paper, even with the scrunching technique, similar to a scribble, right? So what we're going to do now is sort of like looking for shapes in the clouds. We're going to start looking for forms or shapes that start to emerge from the lines and the shapes that we've created through the scribble or the scrunch, right? And we're going to take a marker or pencil, whatever you're working with, and we're going to start to allow that form to come out. Now, you might see something that looks like something, or you might not. If you prefer, you can just trace the lines or color over or color in the shape. So there's multiple ways to approach this. So if you actually see something, you can start to bring that to light with your pen or your pencil. I'm going to take a moment to kind of rotate my scrunchy paper around here. Or like I said, you can start to just add patterns, shapes, colors. It can be abstract, or it can actually start to take on a form.
So Erica, I'm noticing in mine that stress and hope are kind of embedded within each other. That it's not like this is me stressed. I'm like, oh, but wait, within that, there's something else too.
That's right. That's right. And people notice all sorts of things from doing this. And exactly what you're bringing up is just through the process, we start to reveal or experience the stress differently, right? So we're transforming the stress and starting to understand it, sometimes in a little bit different way. So mine was starting out abstract because I didn't see anything, but it's starting to turn into something now. So I'm going to start to embellish that a little bit more. And we're just going to take one more moment with this, and I'm going to invite you then to use the chat bar and maybe just with 2 or 3 words, describe what your experience of this activity was. Okay, so I'll just share mine there. All right, so mine actually started out abstract, but it's turned into a butterfly. All right. And if I took more time, and feel free to, while we're going through this, if you're one who benefits from doodling while you're listening, feel free to continue to work on this as we move through the rest of the slides. But if you'd like to right now, I'd just take a moment using that chat bar and write 2 or 3 words that describe what your experience was like for you. And that includes also if you didn't get it, if it was uncomfortable, if it was unsatisfying, because that's all part of the experience too. And I think it's really important that we practice not only expressing and sharing pleasant responses to these activities, but maybe also unpleasant responses, because that will arise in the children with whom we work or parent as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and open my chat bar and read some of these. So I see a release, transformed it into a garden, comforting, centering, calming, glass half full, playful, from chaos to pretty. Wonderful. Nice to ball the paper up. Yeah, we get a nice, when you do the scrunching activity, we actually get a nice sort of muscle tension and release also, which for those of you who are familiar with the progressive muscle relaxation, which is tense and release, it allows the nervous system to regulate. And we can do that with children by scrunching that ball and then releasing and opening it up. And the body usually likes to take a deep breath after that, right? So it's kind of a backdoor approach to teaching that muscle relaxation. All right, thank you. So I'm going to move on now to talk a little bit more about stress and creativity. So when we are under stress, we've done I have it. I like to include myself in that. I was in the lab hooking people up to, no, I've just read about this stuff. So when we're under stress, brain scans show that the blood actually flows away from the thinking part of the brain, which is fascinating. Because we're trying to reserve our energy just to survive. And so what that means is that we decrease our thinking, our ability to access language decreases, as well as to hear language decreases. Our learning and attention decreases. We cannot make new synaptic connections when we're under heightened amounts of stress. Our ability to regulate emotions decreases, and the fear center activity of the brain increases, right? And so when we talk about sort of best practices and interventions with children, especially when they're under stress or dysregulated, a lot of the literature gives us verbal strategies, right? But if we really think about the way that the brain works, that we're not thinking, we're not accessing language, we're not hearing language, we're not learning, and we're not paying attention when we're under stress, is really counter our brain's functioning. It goes against where our brain is at in the moment to go right to verbal strategies, especially with a lot of times we start in with, why did you do that? What should you have done instead? If a child is struggling. And we've just jumped over so many different points that we're already asking them to problem solve before we've asked them or invited them to engage in opportunities to regulate themselves and allow their thinking brain to come back online, right? So the beautiful way that our brain works, though, is that our sensory systems stay online, which means that the mind is still open to rhythm and music and movement and visual cues that we can access through the creative arts, okay? And so one way to think about art is the acronym ART, which is to access our internal world. What we then do is once we access it through the arts, we do what we're calling externalizing. We create an object, right? And my specialty, which is visual arts, that's usually through drawing, painting, or with clay, for example. But we can also access that internal world and externalize it through music or movement, right? So we can create an object that we can now reflect upon, and that's the R. So now we have a little distance from that feeling, for example, and we can look at it and reflect upon it. Now we're not only regulating the nervous system, but now the thinking brain is starting to come online as we can start to put words to what we're actually observing or experiencing in that moment. And T is for togetherness, that creating art allows us to be together with one another in a novel way that is not intimidating, and allows us to reconnect with one another, but also allows togetherness in terms of the brain's functions, that we're able to connect the emotional brain to the thinking brain and have togetherness internally as well. The creative arts allow us to do all kinds of other things when we really get fancy with it. We can amplify emotions, we can alter emotions, we can contain emotions, we can have safe experimentation. But for our purposes today, we're going to really focus on accessing, reflecting, and creating a sense of togetherness. Okay. Yes.
Really quick, someone asked, can we get this PowerPoint after class?
I can send a modified PowerPoint, and I believe that this is also available on, going to be available on YouTube. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, we are live streaming this onto YouTube, correct?
Perfect. So if people also want to access it there,
Yeah.
and I can send a modified PowerPoint.
All right,
And
awesome.
they'll also get a link.
And things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And
Thank you,
they'll
Erica.
also have access to the recording. That's
Great. Fabulous. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you a little story before we go on to our next activity. And this actually comes out of the book, The Innovative Parent: Raising Connected, Happy, Successful Kids Through Art. So I was at home, and I have 3 children. They're now 11, 8, and 5. But at the time, my youngest was a baby, and I was cooking, and I was bouncing him in his bouncy chair, and I was cooking, and my older 2 were in the other room playing nicely. You know what that sounds like, right? Stop it! I said, stop it! What are you doing? Ah! Right? And so I did what any mother would do, is I yelled at them from the kitchen and told my oldest specifically to knock it off and to stop bothering his sister, because I always blame him. I always assume it's his fault. And so he ran to his room, slammed the door, and I took a deep breath and thought, okay, that was not good parenting. Let me redo this. All right. So then I sort of called up all my best sort of therapy mommy strategies, and I actually stopped what I was doing and went to where he was and knocked on the door softly and said, honey, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you from the other room. And he said, go away. And I said, I understand you're mad at me. I'm labeling his emotions now. I'm taking responsibility. I'm making a repair. I'm labeling his emotions. I'm inviting his anger. It's okay. You're mad at me. I understand that, I hate you. I'm not talking to you. And I just felt like I was hitting my head against the wall. And I thought, my goodness, I am doing all the right things now. Why isn't it working? And so I thought in that moment, I'm an art therapist, and I live and breathe creative strategies in my office and live by them at work because I know that they're effective. So why, when I'm at home, do I keep talking to my own children? Why am I not using these same strategies at home? So that was actually some of the impetus for the book idea was, could I apply art therapy strategies and techniques, make them accessible for the home environment? So I went and I got a piece of paper and I drew 2 circles and a little sad, curious face. And I wrote, actually, this is a different one. This is a different image here, but I wrote, I'm sorry. And I slipped it under the door. And within moments, he drew a sad face and wrote SRY, which is sorry, and slipped it back under the door to me, opened the door, gave me a hug. And then once we had reconnected, we were able to talk about what had happened. And he was able to repair with me and then go back and repair with his sister, right? So this is another example here that you see on your screen, another time that I used it where he was upset about something, my oldest son, and used the same strategy. And I did not know what was wrong. And I wrote, I wonder what happened. And he filled in with the red here and wrote, I am mad, right? So he was able to reflect his feeling, access the feeling, right? Externalize it, then reflect on it and put words to it. I am mad. Okay. I've shared this strategy with many people, not just through the book, but also with friends and family. And the feedback that I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. A dear friend of mine used it with a son of hers who is on the spectrum. And she sent me a text the next day, I think, that said, OMG, Erica, it actually worked. That her son had locked himself in the bathroom. And she said, we had like 30 papers going back and forth underneath the door. And she said it didn't escalate as much as it typically does. He was able to communicate how he was feeling. They were able to repair more quickly. So we're going to go through this activity right now, actually, or a modified version of that activity, which is just to check in right now with how you're doing, just so you can see in real time how this works. Okay, so taking a look at these emojis, or if you don't see the emoji of your choice, people are so familiar with emojis now, they'll be like, wait a minute, the one I want isn't up there, right? Like, I don't think the devil horn one is up there, for example. So any of you looking for the devil horn one, you know what it looks like, right? So I'm going to invite you right now to take your piece of paper. You can use the same piece of paper or a different one if you prefer. And just simply asking yourself, how am I doing? Okay, so just checking in. Now, if we were doing this with somebody, if you have a child nearby, feel free to try to say, hey, so-and-so, come here. How are you doing? Take a look at the screen. Which one of these is you right now? Okay. And we're going to go ahead and draw that on the paper. And then we're going to move down to the next question, which is, what is it saying? So this is mine right here. Okay. And I'm going to add a little speech bubble. Just like that. And so now take a look at your character and ask yourself, if this character were saying something, what would it be saying? And then we're going to add a thought bubble. Because sometimes characters think something different than what they're saying, right? So let's take a look at what it's thinking. If your character was thinking something, and then finally asking yourself, what does it need? If your character needed something, and maybe it's another emoji to say something encouraging or helpful, maybe it's a pillow, maybe it's a cup of coffee, whatever it is that your emoji is needing, go ahead and take a look at it. And again, without trying to think too hard, this comes from a not knowing place. A lot of times when people say, I don't know, I say, that's okay. It comes from a not knowing place. What does it need? I'm actually going to give myself my emoji a cup of coffee. That sounded good. All right. So Marnie, can you be my guinea pig and share with us what you made?
I absolutely can. It's on my crumpled side of paper though.
Okay.
So it's probably going to be hard to see.
Oh yeah, because of the background.
I know, but I started with the smiley face emoji.
Smiley emoji.
The smiley emoji. Normally 2021 was the emoji with the, I don't know if it's cake exploding out of the head. But that was my emoji for most of 2021, was just that. So now I'm back to a smiling emoji, which I'm really grateful for. And the thought bubble was, I feel stressed out, but this moment is really good for me. And then the other thought was grateful.
Yeah.
And then I connected it down to, it's the bottom middle emoji with one winking face and one big eye.
Yeah.
And that thought bubble there was have fun. Like just
fun.
have fun.
It's fun. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. And I'll share mine briefly. I wrote, my emoji is saying, I love inclusion matters. I was just saying before we opened it up to the participants, I'm like, boy, you all are a fun group. This is fun. Right? And then my emoji is thinking, so much to do later. Right? And then as I was talking about possibilities, I actually thought, a coffee sounds good. That sounds like a good little sale. So just like like maybe after this, I'll just go and have a little coffee or something and sit and decompress before I move on. Right? So you can see a lot going on with this activity. Not only are we identifying emotions and accessing those and externalizing them, but now we're talking about the emoji, right? So just like it's easier to give good advice to a friend rather to ourselves, we now have a character. We now have externalized or objectified a part of ourselves that we can look at. And now we have a different perspective because we're not just talking about ourselves, right? We're now talking about a character. And so children and adolescents especially can think a lot more outside the box in terms of, what would they tell this character? What does this character need? What is it saying? What is it thinking? And it lowers defenses, again, especially as they get a little bit older. You might be familiar with, how are you doing? Fine. How is school? Fine. Right? And so with that, I might even say, okay, so which one of these is fine? Right? And sometimes we're very surprised at the not so fine looking emojis that are fine. Okay, so if this one's fine, what would it say? What would it be thinking? What might it need, right? And we can go a little bit deeper with that. All right. So I'm just going to share this short little graphic video with you now. and narrate along. I was doing a training for an after school group up in Los Angeles, and they're called LA's Best. And they asked me, since I was going to be up there anyways, if I would do a little something with their students, with the kids that were going to be there before I went into the training. And so we started with just a simple directive to just draw plants. It could be cactus, it could be flowers, it could be trees, there's any kind of plants that they wanted to draw. And then we used a very similar strategy that we just did, which was, what would one of these plants be saying if you were to add a speech bubble? Okay, and so this was a little girl who drew flowers, and she wrote, "I am scared," in the speech bubble. Okay. I asked her if any of the other flowers had anything to say, and her other flower said, "I'm scared too." I asked about thoughts, and she added, "We had a lockdown," in her thought bubble. I asked if the flowers needed anything, and she said they needed a cat. I asked if the cat had anything to say, and the cat said, "You're okay now." Okay, so this is a group of about 30 students. And so of course I couldn't stay there the entire time. I had to keep rotating around this group of students and addressing different needs and checking in. So I told her I would come back later and check back in with her flowers. So I went back later, I said, "How are those flowers doing now?" Notice I'm not asking her how she's doing. She said they're still scared. So I said, "Do you want to give them anything more?" And she said, "Yes, I want to give them a house." So I said, "Can you go ahead and do that now?" And she said, "Yes." And she added the house right over the flowers. Then I asked them, "How are they doing now?" And she said, "They're still scared, but now they're safe." And I said, "Is that okay?" And she said, "Yeah, it's okay now." All right.
I just wanted to jump in really quickly. I
Yeah.
love, and I was thinking about this as I was reading your book. We're such a highly verbal society. And I've talked my poor teenager into, near comas at times. Are you okay? Are you sure okay? Is that okay? Are you okay? But I love the fact that art is that bridge for communication because it's safe.
Yes.
And it doesn't require them to have the words, and not all our kids have the same access to language.
That's right.
Right? So whether they're verbal, emerging verbal, nonverbal, it's a really safe bridge to share what's happening. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll share another on that. I'll share another quick little strategy. Is not included in the book. I just did it one day just to try. I try to more and more in my parenting, try to, walk the walk, and think creatively. Okay, what can I do differently right now? And I think I was prepping a workshop one day, and I was listening out for my kids, and my oldest son called his youngest son an idiot. And what I would typically do is go and say, "What did you just say? You shouldn't say that. You have no idea how many years of therapy your little brother's going to need later in life. And you better start putting money in his piggy bank now to pay for his therapy." And no, I'm not actually that awful, but but I would come in and tell him no, and that's not okay. And you know what my oldest son would say is, "But he, right? But he stole my Lego. But he," right? And so this day I decided to do something differently. I happened to be on my computer, and so I called him in. I said, "Hey, could you come here? I want to show you something." And he's like, "Sure, Mom." So he comes in, he sits down. I opened up a Word document, and I went onto the internet, and I found a picture of a sad little boy, and I copied and pasted into the Word document. And in the Word document, they have those little like shape symbols that you can select. So I selected a thought bubble, and I opened it up over the image of the little boy. And then in the word bubble, I typed, "I'm an idiot. Nobody likes me. I'm stupid." And my oldest son, who's watching me do this the whole time, his whole body language changed, and he just slumped down and he said, "Okay, Mom, I'm sorry. I get it." And I said, "Who should you really be saying sorry to?" And he said, "My brother." And he went straight away and apologized to his brother, right? And I think that would have made, I think that made a much bigger impact than had I told him verbally. that what he was doing was wrong and that he was making a negative impact on his brother. Okay. So we're going to move on to clearing out stressful thoughts. So this has been a particularly, this one is also not in the book. I'm giving you guys a lot of fun extras, some bonuses. This one I actually started doing since the pandemic, and came up with this because I noticed in my clinical practice that there was a lot of struggle about not having control. And so I developed this intervention to help with that. And it's been a very useful tool, I think, and in a lot of the webinars that I'm doing, a lot of people say that this is their favorite of all the activities we do personally as adults, right? So what I'm going to invite you to do is go ahead and draw 3 concentric circles. They don't have to look exactly like this. It can be a bullseye if you prefer. So we're going to have our smallest circle in the middle. That's going to be control. We're going to have the medium circle around that, which is influence. And then we're going to have our largest circle on the outside ring, which is going to be concern. Okay, so control, influence, and concern. And using words or shapes or symbols, what I'm going to invite you to do now is to start to consider in what areas of your life you have complete control or feel like you have control. And in those areas that we don't have control, are there ways that you can influence? So maybe I don't have control over this, but I do have influence. And then where we have neither control nor influence, we can have concern. Okay, so my son actually did this one, and you can see he believes that his experience is that he can control his imagination, himself, and his toys. He can influence his siblings, global warming, his parents. That's true. He's very good at influencing us, and he can influence his friends. And he had concerns about coronavirus and time at the time that he made this. Okay, so just take a moment now to fill in those 3 circles. And one thing that we do with this activity is we can consider also or talk to, if you're doing this activity with a child or an adolescent, where we don't have control or influence, what do we do with concern, right? And we can check in with that and say, well, maybe there are things we can influence within our concern. So for example, my son put his concern was corona, that he has no influence or control over it. But yet we can influence as a family what we do, right? That we actually can make choices where this concern, where he feels out of control or lack of control or influence, that we can start to pick it apart and say, is there anything at all where we can, in our own home, in our own school, in our own community, somehow influence this situation? And that can really help with developing more sense of empowerment and efficacy rather than feeling at the mercy of. So I'm going to invite you right now, if you'd like to continue to work on this, that is fine. Take a few more moments. Otherwise, if you're ready to share a couple words, just 2 or 3 words in the chat bar about either the process, any insights, anything that surprised you during this activity. It took the steam out of the concern. Yeah, thanks, Marnie. These strategies can be easily implemented. Yeah. Very introspective. And you can imagine doing this in a group as well, right? That I see Kathy saying, as a teacher, I'm concerned for my students' emotions. Yes. And so as an example, we can take that concern and say, so where do I have influence? Is there anything that I can do as a teacher to influence that? And maybe that's even using the strategy sometime this week. That might be something that you could do.
Sorry to interrupt
Martin,
you.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love the concept that you can do this. So if you're in a home with multiple children,
Absolutely.
and you have them do it, then you're able as the parent to reflect where the concerns overlapping, where is the area of influence that we or I have. And I also imagine in a classroom setting, the same would be true, that if you could do this with parents and kids as we're navigating distance learning still, it's almost like it gives you kind of a roadmap of, oh, this is what's going on and this is what we can do.
Yeah, it's a nice assessment tool, right? That we can also kind of take the lay of the land of where people's concerns are. So it's both an intervention, right, to influence or to help. I see the word healing here, right? And it's also an opportunity for us as caregivers or teachers or counselors to get a sense of where the child's mind is and how they're understanding things. Beautiful, thank you. All right. So we can also use the arts to be mindful, and by seeing and observing and noticing and wondering, which are all artist stances, that when we look as if we sort of put on our artist's eyes, right, that we get very curious about the world around us. And we really start to observe things very carefully. And we can use that in order to clear stressful thinking and to come into a regulated state where we feel really inherently safe within ourselves, at least in that moment, right? So one way that we can do that is to, and I sometimes, depending on the age that you are parenting or working with, that we can even call it a game. And I'm going to invite you to do this game with me now. So you're going to look around you and find a color, and it can be any color. It can be just a color that catches your eyes. It can be your favorite color, a soothing color. So take a look around, and once you find that color, I'm going to invite you to start looking around and seeing if you can find that color anywhere else, okay? I'm going to do it with you. I'm going to even look outside. And each time you see that color in your mind, you can just say, for example, my color is blue. So I'm saying in my mind, blue, blue, blue-ish, blue, blue. Okay. And then coming back together. And again, just maybe a couple comments about what that was like for you. You can use the chat bar if you would like to, if you prefer to unmute yourself, just to say a couple words about what you noticed on the inside, in the mind, in the body, as you were looking for your color. Orange, orange, orange. Calming. I chose a color I love, and it put me in a good place to notice what I love. Yeah. And I don't know about all of you, but when I do that exercise, and I practice this exercise when I am jogging, because my brain likes to talk to me a lot. Right? And so I try to be mindful of whether or not I'm productively thinking about something, or if I just want to enjoy my job or my run and not think about my work and clear my mind. And so I'll pick a color and I'll just look for it in my surroundings, and it clears my mind and stop chatting away, right? And I'm able to just relax a little bit more. So other comments I see here, I didn't think I would find it and didn't, with a big smiley face. A time for a good observation. I didn't think I would find it. Oh, but I did twice. Yeah, sometimes I'll pick a challenging color too. And like pink, I find is challenging. And so then I get this little like, oh, I found it. Right? So this is a really quick strategy that you can even do during a class, for example, just to reset. You can even tell students, go and get 3 blue objects and bring them back. to give them a little movement break. Another way that we can sort of use a similar strategy but different is to find one object, and we're going to do that right now. So any object that you'd like to spend a little time looking at. And what we're going to do is in our minds, we're going to trace the outline of the object. So we call this in art a contour line drawing, and you can see an example of an actual blind contour on the left. A blind contour is when you don't look at your paper and you trace around the edges of the object. You draw the object without lifting your pencil and without looking at your paper. Okay, so if you'd like to try it with your pencil and paper or your pen and paper, feel free to do that. Or you can do it entirely in your mind's eye by just, or with your finger. Tracing around the object, finding the contour, and then once you finish the outside, you can move to the inside details of it. And as you're doing this exercise, again, just checking in, noticing what's happening in the body, noticing what's happening in the breath, noticing what's happening in the mind. All right. And then putting 2 or 3 words in the chat bar. Or Marnie, if you'd like to share what your experience was like doing that.
I do. It was funny. So I have these beautiful roses in front of me. So I picked a rose because I love flowers. And then I started to look at the rose and trace it. And then I looked at what I'd created compared to the rose. And I was like, wow, I really need to relax and have more fun. Because my version was kind of tight and scrunched and a little like, and I was like, okay, I need to do this more often. It's time to relax a little bit here.
Yeah, so relax, enjoy more, amusing. Yeah, especially if you actually do the drawing. And this is an excellent activity for children. So we can use it not only as a mindful activity and sort of like a resetting and clearing the mind, but this could also be used for children who are perfectionistic, who really have a hard time with making mistakes. I'm working with a little girl right now, 5 years old, who has very big tantrums. And this would be an example of, right, being able to draw something but have a funny outcome, where it can be okay. It can be okay for it not to look like it's supposed to. It can be okay to make mistakes and to build that resiliency around creating things that aren't perfect or what is in your mind that it should be like or look like, which then has a lot of carryover to other areas of life, of course, as well, right? Being able to be resilient and flexible around things not going the way that you want them to go, right? So lots of different ways to adapt these activities.
And I think a lot of people in our community work with children with sensory processing disorder.
Yep.
So finding those tips and tools that allows them to start playing with that rigidity and that need for, a specific container.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go on now to sparking joy, or at least pleasant moments. So, and I will caption there because for some people, especially under a lot of stress or hardship, or if they're just in a funk, that it might be hard to access feelings of happiness or joy. If some folks have restricted affect, and so they don't experience a wider range of emotion. And so their affect is, a bit more constrained typically anyways. So if we just look for neutral or pleasant moments, that could be okay as well. And that can help immensely in terms of, again, keeping the nervous system regulated and being able to access our internal world and connect with others and learn and all of those wonderful things. So I always tell my clients that they say, well, I'll ask them, do you feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, right? That's a lot of times the gauge that I'll use, rather than, well, do you feel happy or do you feel sad? But just starting with, is that pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And if they say neutral, I'll say, that's great. We can hang out in neutral all day long, right? Because it means that they feel safe and regulated in that moment, right? Pleasant is nice as well, okay? So since we're still in winter, I thought we would do one with the theme of winter. And so I'm going to invite you right now to just draw a simple snowflake. And then I'm going to take you through actually a sensory activity for filling in the snowflake. I am going to do this on the whiteboard just to show you how, if you are online still, do I have access to a whiteboard? Perhaps not. I might not, that's okay. But for those of you who do have access on Zoom to a whiteboard, that you could use a whiteboard to do this activity as well. Okay, so we don't have access to that today, which is totally fine. I'll just do it on the piece of paper and hold that up for you. But this is something that you could use on Zoom if you're working with students that they can draw on the whiteboard, or you can draw on the whiteboard and show them how to do that. And you could even do a classroom snowflake where the students get to take turns drawing on the whiteboard and adding a little pleasure to the spoke. So a really simple, there's a couple different examples here of snowflakes that you can draw. A really simple way to do it is just to start with a dot in the middle and then draw lines crisscrossing over like this. And then if you want to get fancy, you can add little details at the end of each of those spokes. All right. And we can simply just write little pleasures or little winter pleasures, things that you enjoy during the winter. So here in this example, we see music and playing and drawing and spending time with family and helping and movies and reading. So that's perfectly fine. Or if you would like to go through the sensory activity with me, then you can just follow along, okay? So starting with something that you see during the winter, something that you see during the winter that brings you pleasure. Something that you taste during the winter that brings you pleasure. Something that you touch, right? And writing one of these pleasures on each of the spokes or around the snowflake if you prefer. Something you touch during the winter that brings you pleasure. Then noticing something that you smell. Something you smell during the winter that brings you pleasure. And something finally that you hear. Something that you hear during the winter that brings you pleasure. All right. And would somebody be willing to share what you did? Yes, Kathy, I see your hand up. Thank you. Oh, you're gonna have to unmute first. There we go.
Hello. This is amazing. My classroom is called the Snowflakes, and I'm going to use this. That was just fortuitous. So I think the order started with C. I see snow, and that's a calming thing I see. I smell pine trees. I hear the wind blowing in the trees, and I feel a cozy blanket.
Wonderful, thank you. And Kathy, what was the process like for you? What did you notice in on the inside as you were noticing these things and writing them down?
At first, I was concerned that I would not be able to draw a snowflake. So I tried, and I accepted that it was okay the way it was. And then I had to think and feel about all those different emotions and sensations that made my tummy kind of wobble. And then I thought of the words that came with it. And I wanted something to smell sweet, to sound gentle, and to feel soft.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And once you notice those, I'm wondering what happened to that tummy wobble.
It went away, and I took a deep breath, and I feel better.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. I'm just going to check the chat bar real quick to see if there's anything more in there. No? Okay. All right. So I believe, let me just go on to my next. Yeah. So I did really well today. I am notoriously bad at going all the way up to the end and not having any time for questions. So I'm really proud of myself that I timed that perfectly. So we have a little bit of time for questions.
That was amazing.
Here is my contact information. If you want to get in touch with me, if you have, quite specific questions, you're welcome to email me. My website's Therapy with Erica. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, I send it out quarterly, and there's always new creative tips in there, in addition to any workshops or podcasts that I might be on. So that's subscribe, therapywitherica.com/connect. This is the book. And thank you to Inclusion Matters and to UCLArts Healing for bringing us all together.
Yeah.
And yay, I'm really happy we have time for questions.
I would love, if it's okay, Erica, I loved that. I loved that. And Kathy, don't worry, because my snowflake looked like an amoeba. It's actually kind of awesome. I think I'm going to frame mine just to remind me to stay playful and don't take it
Yeah,
seriously.
did you see mine? That's mine.
This is gorgeous. I love it. It's simplistic. It's modern art. Corky O'Rourke, who's one of our professional advisory board members and just an amazing educator with College View School in Glendale, had a great point. And I'm thinking about these activities you just gave us as a way to kickstart classroom time on Zoom even.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, as we're thinking about coming back to school and getting back to a new normal, our students' mental health is going to be vital. I could see this kind of training and information would be so incredibly important in reaching kids and kind of reaching in to know where their thoughts and fears are.
Yes.
So could this be an exercise, even right now on Zoom, that you use with your kiddos to kind of start the day as a check-in point with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to remember the statistic. I read it recently. It was something like a 30% increase in hospital visits among youth due to mental health issues. 30% increase.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
So don't forget, if you have any questions, just raise your hand in the chat, or I think Corky has her hand raised. So Corky, you're up.
I do. Erica, thank you so much. Yeah, the students at my school, I don't know, they're nonverbal. So, and they don't write, they don't read. So I'm thinking of this more globally for all kids as we return back to school. I'm working with some women, and we're trying to get our teachers to have like a short mental health training, like we do sexual harassment and mandated reporter and workplace diversity. We do it. They have like 6 weeks to do it as soon as we start school. And I feel so strongly that mental health needs to be included in this training after this very traumatic time has happened for so many kids.
Yeah.
I think that kids that we expected to really fall apart did things that were amazing on Zoom. And then kids that you're like, oh yeah, they've got this, and they're falling apart. Yeah. And I feel like what you have to offer is as a really nice bridge, especially for teachers that, I'm not trained in mental health issues.
Right.
I'm not a trained therapist.
Right.
And so I'm not sure I would say the right thing or lead the child in the right way. And I think that having something like this maybe would raise some red flags that then I would get that student to the right people,
right?
To know what they're thinking and what they're feeling and what they're afraid of and what they've been dealing with. So I just wanted to make that comment that I think it's so important that I've written down your information, and
Great.
I'm going to pass it along to our district folk and our PTA, and you might be totally swamped with more work than you can handle, which would probably be a nice thing. But I just want to thank you that it really is a nice bridge.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for picking up on that, because that's something that, you know, we've tried very hard to do, is to make it so, you know, for non-therapists, that this isn't doing therapy. It's not. And that way anybody can do it. And it's really just, you know, I went through my own sort of process within my field. We can be a bit protective in art therapy because, you know, and it has to do with just like the history of our field and wanting to feel like we have something that's important that nobody else can do. And so I had to do a lot of soul searching when I created this book and started making these tools more accessible to the general public, and to say, well, nobody says to an educator or a parent, you know, you can't talk to kids because therapists talk to kids. You can't play with kids because play therapists play with kids. Like, nobody does that, right? And so why can't we take what we know as creative art therapists and make it very accessible to the public? And so thank you for commenting on that, because that's something that's been a passion of mine, and I think really an important part of this work. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
And yes, reach out to me, get in touch.
It looks like Alima has a question, or has had her
Yes,
hand raised.
hi. Hi, you said it properly. Hi, my name is Alima, and I'm here from Great Start Wayne in Wayne County, Michigan. And I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for hosting us and sharing your amazing work with us. I learned a lot. I wanted to know, are you open to doing, like, we facilitate meetings with parents in Wayne County, and we just did one with surrounding mental health, kind of just like self-care, but would you be available to maybe do something surrounding like art therapy for adults, or art therapy that could help parents? I guess along like what you just did, it could help parents to kind of translate that to their kids, if we wanted to do something like a meeting space via Zooms, similar to what you've just done.
Yeah, I think just to sort of comment broadly, anybody who's interested in this material and bringing it into your school or into your district, or, you know, just shoot me an email and let's talk about it, about the details, logistics, timing, you know, all of that. And then we can go from there, see if we can make something work out.
Okay, great, thanks.
I also just wanted to say, because I know there's only one of Erica, could we clone her? We might. Actually, no, we would. But I have read The Innovative Parent, and I cannot speak highly enough about this book. First of all, it's funny, so thank you. I can't tell you how many of the parenting stories I was like, all I can say is I wish I'd had this book 17 years ago when I started my parenting journey, truly. And for educators as well, the tools are easy to use. The research backs it, which is so amazing. I could spend an hour talking with you just about the brain science behind art and how it leads to the outcomes we want our children to have. You know, so it's wonderful. It's a joyful read, and you walk away with information that I feel like I could use in my adult relationships, not just in how I'm communicating with my kiddo, but in how I'm communicating at large, and how I'm processing things, right? So.
Ping, actually, my co-writer, Ping Ho, who's the director and founder of UCLArts Healing, she has a very funny story where she used the emoji strategy with her husband. Actually, it was the reverse. Her husband used it on her. That's what it was. Her husband, who's not an art therapist, but, you know, here's her work, obviously, and they had been in a conflict. I have her permission to tell the story, by the way. They had been in a conflict, and she was still kind of holding on to some stuff about it, and they hadn't really repaired fully. As she was in her office working, and all of a sudden this like piece of paper comes underneath the door with the emoji on it, and said, like, you know, how he was feeling and all that. And she said it touched her. She's like, you're using my own, you know, our own strategies against me. And they were able to have a repair around that. But yes, thank you, Marnie. I mean, people, in a very lovely, and it just fills my heart. You know, people have contacted me saying that they're doing book clubs with their faculty using the book, or counseling support groups, you know, peer consultation groups who've gotten the book and used it as sort of like a book club discussion. Also, I do a lot of free workshops through UCLArts Healing right now. During the time of the pandemic, we have a series called the HOPE series, HOPE, which is helping online people everywhere. And so you can go to UCLArts Healing, their website, and they have free workshops in drumming and movement. And I do one very similar to this. And so feel free to take a look at those as well and share those with your community.
Absolutely.
Those are just happening every weekend, every other weekend. We've got something going on for free through UCLArts Healing.
And we are over. Gosh, I feel like we could stay here forever. There were so many topics to discuss. Erica, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for just sharing your wisdom so generously and for letting us do it. So few of these are experiential. So being able to do it. Yes, Ms. Romero's giving us a thumbs up.
Right?
Thank you for letting us caveat. We got a thumbs up.
Yeah, we got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
It was fantastic. Yes, that felt so good.
Yeah.
So thank you for your
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you for everybody for your work. It is, I have to say, in terms of control, influence, concern, you know, all of the concerns that I hold over this past year, that this is certainly a healing process for me to know that I can influence people who are influencing other people, right? And that it just trickles out, and that fills me up and helps me to stay sane during this time. So thank you for being here and for all of the work that you all do, because it's just, I tell my clients, I say, look for the healers, look for the helpers, right? And getting to do activities and webinars like this with all of you, it just fills my bucket. So thanks so much.
Thank you. You just filled ours. We are going to be mental health warriors of the light.